In this week, this week is not so focused on the Wittgenstein text itself as one way of reading what's going on in the Wittgenstein as bearing on the idea that meaning has to do with truth conditions. Remember, we began the term with that idea that you explain meaning in terms of truth conditions. To know to know the meaning of a statement is to know what has to be the case for it to be true. And if you're thinking of meaning in those terms, then when you think of all the bits and pieces in a sentence, the nouns and verbs, the joining words, all these terms, then their meaning will be a matter of what they contribute to determining the whole sentence as true or false. Right? So for a name, what about a name contributes to fixing the truth value of a sentence containing it? Any guesses? The reference, very good. Who said that? Excellent. Right. So if you know the object the name stands for, right, then you know something. You're on the way to knowing what has to be the case for the sentence to be true, because what the rest of the sentence goes on to talk about has to be true of that object, or the whole sentence to be true. Yes? Okay. So for a predicate, for something like is tall, what would it be? What would the analog of reference be? Meaning, the sense, yes, but what does that have to do with truth condition? The condition that has to hold for the sentence to be true. Yep. A state of the world. That's getting closer because at any rate that's something out there, if you see what I mean. But we need a bit more, something a bit more. Yeah, yeah.
Like it has to be the case that the thing being predicated of has to follow.
Has to.
Follow. So for instance,
Has to follow.
John is tall.
Yeah, John is tall.
So
Yep. Okay, so we need something about what it takes for the predicate to apply to an object. Yeah, that must be right. Yep. A set would do. Yeah, yeah, that'd be a natural way to think of it. Would you give it? I thought there was a hand over here. No. Okay. Yeah, a set will do. With a set, we can say we're home. If you take the set, I mean, tall is not a perfect example, but if you took the set of tall things, the set of things that count as tall for present purposes, then you know what it takes for an object to fall under the concept, namely it be in that set. Yes? Yes? Conditions of satisfaction would be just fine. Any way of specifying what it takes for the object, for the predicate to be true of the object will do. Yeah, and a set will be just fine. Yes? Okay, now what is it for in propositional logic, you guys all studied terms like and, or, if, then, and so on. What would it be for a term like and, or if, then? What's the analog of the reference of a name? Or the set that specifies the extension of a predicate? Melissa?
A function.
A function? What kind of function?
Well, typically from truth values to other truth values, or from pairs of truth values.
Very good, yeah. What about that? Yeah. Okay, well, in that case, let's move on, right? So suppose you think of this kind of picture here that we've been looking at so much. At the top, you've got a description of one aspect of the use that you make of a sentence like that thing is round. Namely, there's what input will cause you to use the sentence. So if you've got perception of a round thing, that will cause you to say, that thing is round. Right? That's an aspect of the use. And if you accept the sentence, that thing is round, then if you're going to act on the basis of that sentence, I mean, if you're going to act on the thing and you accept that sentence, then you want to shape your hand roundly, if you see what I mean, to get the thing, right? So these are, at the top and the bottom there, are descriptions of our use of the term, the technique that you learn when you're using the term, namely to use it in response to that kind of perception and to act in these ways in when you accept the sentence. Yeah? And the thing in the middle, the image of roundness, the mental state, the process, the natural way of thinking of it is, that's my blueprint for what it takes for something to be round. That's my specification of the set. That's the way I state what the function is from objects to truth values. My image of roundness. That tells me what it is that roundness is, and that's what I'm doing when I respond that way to a perception of a round thing and act that way in response to a round thing. Yeah? So the bit in the middle is the specification of truth condition. Yeah? But what do we know about the bit in the middle, if Wittgenstein is right? It does no work. It goes away. Right? It's a fifth wheel. It doesn't turn anything. Yeah? So on the face of it, if Wittgenstein is right, then, and this applies quite generally, then the whole idea of a truth conditional approach to meaning is just a mistake. Right? That's the thing that just kept vanishing. Your grasp of the truth condition. All that matters is the technique. So in general, I said, you could talk about the semantic value of a term as being how the term contributes to determining the truth or falsity of a sentence containing it. What we just worked through is that for a name, the semantic value will be the reference, the object it stands for. For a predicate, it'll be a mapping from objects onto truth or falsity. Someone said the conditions of satisfaction or the set. And then you would derive the truth condition of Raleigh smokes from knowing what the reference is of Raleigh and what the mapping from objects onto truth or falsity is, right? That would be the classical picture that Frege and Russell and Dretschke and Fodor were working with, yeah? But if this reading of Wittgenstein is right, and if Wittgenstein is right, then this goes out of the window. And the problem was that you can't get this to do any work. You can't derive the use from the truth condition. The thing has the use it does, but not because it has that truth condition. That image could be interpreted in endlessly many different ways. Yeah, that was a classical problem. Yes? Now, the thing about and or and so on is that the point there really admits of something like proof. I mean, Wittgenstein's main point really seems to admit of something like proof in this case. I mean, in a relatively formal sense. I mean, it's not a very difficult proof either. So do you remember these? Yes, we all happy with these? Our old friends, the truth tables, right? When I write these things out, I usually get something wrong. So let me just look at them, yeah. I can't see anything too far wrong there. That looks all right. Is that right, Melissa? Are these right? Yeah? Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So we've got okay. So you've got all possible combinations of truth and falsity of the individual sentences, and for each of them you say what the truth or falsity of the total thing comes to. Yeah. Now, you might not have seen quite this way of writing inference rules before, but I hope this is very intuitive. So the introduction rule for and is if you get A and you get B, then you get A and B. Yep, that's all right. So if you get Raleigh smokes and Isaac fishes, you can derive from that Raleigh smokes and Isaac fishes. Yes? Watch me very closely here. What about if you get A and B? Well, from A and B, you can derive A. Yes? So if you get Raleigh smokes and Isaac fishes, you get Raleigh smokes. Is there anything else you can derive from A and B? B. Very good. So from Raleigh smokes and Isaac fishes, you can also derive Isaac fishes. Yes? So summing up, here are the inference rules for A and B. For and, right? From A and B, you can derive A and B. From the sentence A and B, you can derive A. And from the sentence A and B, you can derive B. Yeah? That's all perfectly straightforward, right? So that's the use of the term. That's the way we use the term. That's the inputs and outputs. That's like the perception and action thing for round. Yeah? How does it go for or? Well, if you get A, you can derive A or B. And if you get B, you can derive A or B. Yeah? That's all right. Well, how does it go for eliminating A or B? What can you derive from A or B? This is a little bit more tricky. Nothing? Sorry? Very tricky, right. Okay. Anyone want to have a shot at it? How bright are we feeling? I once asked an entire graduate class this, quite a big graduate class, and nobody could do it. Anyway, a shameful moment. But yes. If A, then not B? No, because if you got A or B, you might have both A and B. Yep. Yep. If not A, then B. Again, if not A, then B. I guess you can derive that, yeah, from it. But what I want to know is from, from A or B, I can get, if not A, then B. Sure, that's right. Anything else? I can get more than that. Yeah, that's a tricky thing. Well, okay, I'm right at the back.
You can assume A and then derive C, and then assume B and then derive C. So then you can derive C.
Oh, very good. Okay, so, all right, you guys will take this, right? So, this wasn't you, right? If you get A, and you can derive C, and you get B, and you can derive C, then if you get A or B, then you can say, well, one way or another, C. Yeah? That makes sense? Okay. And I think that will drop out as a special case here. Yeah. Okay, that's it. There's one little wrinkle on this, but that's the basic idea. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, the only little wrinkle is when you're deriving C from A, you might make some auxiliary assumptions, right? So you might make the assumptions X, and when you're deriving C from B, you might make the assumptions Y. So when you're deriving C from A or B, you can say, well, A or B with X, Y as auxiliary assumptions. Yeah, on the assumptions that X and Y, then I can get C either way. Yeah, but that's just filling out the basic point here. Yep. Okay. So look at that. That's just what you said, isn't it? I missed out the thing about the X's and Y's there, but if you get A or B, you can derive C from A, you can derive C from B, then from A or B alone, you can derive C. All right? That's very simple. I mean, if I'm explaining this right, it's very simple. If you don't get it, it seems completely incomprehensible. But okay, so what's the relation between these kind of rules of inference and the truth table? I mean, when you're doing elementary logic, you learn these two different ways of characterizing the meaning of and or. You learn the truth table, and you learn the rules of inference. So, is the and or ambiguous? You know, they get two different specifications of their meaning? Or does one of them give you the real meaning, and the other one just tells you something that's not really to do with the meaning? Aha. Yeah?
They just need to tell you the same thing.
They tell you the same thing?
You can't derive something using one way that you could derive using the other way. They both imply each other.
They both imply each other?
Yes, if you use a truth table, you do it semantically. So you're going to want to arrive at a result that is only true if you can find the derivation using the rules, and vice versa. So
Yeah. So you can derive the input-output rules from the truth table,
yeah.
And you can derive the truth table from the input-output rules. Yeah, that's a natural way to think of it. And speaking speaking for myself, I spent 15 long years teaching people elementary logic, and what I always did was drill them in the use of the rules. You know, just say, just don't bother about what we're doing here, just learn how to use the rules. And then you teach them the truth table, and you think, now it'll all drop into place. But of course, most people just went through the entire semester in a complete fog about what they were doing. But you're saying you can derive the rules from the truth table, and you can derive the truth table from the rules. So if you had the classic truth conditional picture, you think the rules of inference are specifying the inputs and outputs. Like, this is the introduction rule for round, this is the elimination rule for round, and the thing in the middle is a specification of truth condition. So for and, the truth table will be the thing in the middle, and you can derive the rules of inference from that. Is that all right? You see what I'm saying? Okay. So then you just think how you're going to do this. Here's the truth table for and. Now, we don't know what the rules of inference are, right? For and. So let's suppose we've just got the truth table. We don't know any rules of inference. How are we going to derive the rules of inference from the truth table? You guys have done elementary logic. How are you going to do it? Get me the rules of inference from the truth table. Yes?
So you just want to see what would preserve the truth as you go down. So
What would
you can get the and elimination.
Yeah.
So you've got A and B,
Yeah.
and you know that's true.
Yeah.
Then just by looking at the first line of the truth table, you know, I can say that A is true.
Okay.
I can say that B is true.
Okay.
So I've got my and elimination.
Okay. This discussion has been extremely important historically. This is really like in this you get a kind of microcosm of everything that went on in the 20th century in philosophy of language. It really is a kind of lab case. And what you're saying is really an important line of thought, because it does seem like the rules of inference have to be truth preserving. If you get a true input, you get a true output. Yeah, that's what you want from the rules of inference. And you can even round it up a bit, that what you want is your input rule to be as undemanding as possible. You see what I mean? You don't want to add anything gratuitous into the input rule. So if you put in, and I've also got to have, and the grass is green, before I can derive A and B, that would be truth preserving. Yeah? But the grass is green bit would be completely gratuitous, so you cut it out. You want that to be as undemanding as possible. And from the output rule, you want to get as much as you can consistent with preserving truth. So if I had to derive A but not to derive B, yeah, you think, well, wait a minute, I want to derive B. You see what I mean? Because that would be truth preserving too. Yeah, that's fine. But look, how am I going to reason like this? I've got to follow your reasoning if I'm going to do the derivation here, right? So I'm going to argue, if I've got A and I've got B, if I've got A and B, then I've got A and I've got B. Therefore, I can derive A and B. Yep. Now, when I'm doing that, I'm using a rule of inference. Yeah? In fact, I couldn't, I mean, it's kind of obvious. I couldn't do any derivation here without using some rule of inference or other. So if I'm going to say, if I've got A and B, then I've got A and I've got B, then I've got to use the rule of inference for if-then. And I've got to use the rule of inference for and. Yeah? Because if I've got A and B, A and I've got B, then I've got A, and then I've got B. Yep. So that's the rule, that's the elimination rule for and I was using right there. So if I'm going to reason from the truth table to the rule of inference, I have to be using some rule of inference or other. Yeah? That's really completely inescapable. Any reasoning at all involves the use of some rules, like these ones. Yeah? It might not be this very rule, but it's going to involve the use of some basic rule of inference. Yep?
But that rule, even though it looks just like the implication rule, that's got to be outside of the logic at this point in time.
It's going to be outside of the logic.
Yeah, because we haven't even got rules yet. You know, we're trying to get off the ground.
That's right. We're trying to get off the ground. Yeah. Exactly.
We can't say that we're using that rule because we don't have that rule.
That's right.
So that's just the sort of structure of the English language that we're still it's clear that we can reason in the English language.
Right.
So we use some other mechanism that's not yet the truth table.
Some other.
Because we can't read it that way, because we haven't told you what it is.
Exactly, that's right. But I mean, if we're really trying to get to basics here, if we're really asking at the starting point, where do the rules of inference come from? What you're agreeing is that we've got to be using some rules of inference or other. And you're saying, well, of course it's not these rules. But suppose you say, well, I've got some other rules of inference, yeah? They came from somewhere else. Well, could they have come from a truth table? No, right? Of course not. And really, when you think it through, the basic point here is very elementary and completely incontrovertible. If you're going to derive means use rules of inference. Use stuff like this. That's what derive means. If you say prove, it means use stuff like this. Yeah? If you don't use stuff like this, then you don't have any way of making transitions from sentence to sentence. That's what a proof is when you make transitions from sentence to sentence. Yeah? So you don't have the dynamics to get moving, if you see what I mean. You just have this static truth table and no way of generating anything from it. Yeah? So you simply can't get the rules of inference out of the truth table without putting rules of inference in. Yeah? You've got to presuppose some rules of inference. Yeah? This is a really basic fact. It's like, it's one of these things like T.S. Eliot said, I got to use words when I talk to you. You know, I got to use rules of inference if I want to reason, if I want to do derivations. Yeah? That's just the way. That's just the way it is. There is really no getting around that, is there? Put up your hand if what you said, if you think that what I said is absolutely incontrovertible and that resistance is useless to that kind of point. 1, 2. I promise you, resistance is useless. Is there Bring it on. Does anyone wish to try to resist that? Aha. Yes.
So is the claim that the rules of inference are more basic than the truth table?
The claim is, at the moment is only that they can't be derived from the truth table.
Okay, so if I could give you a truth table and a rule of inference and say there's no way that these could match.
There's no way that these could match.
Yeah, for example,
Uh-huh.
given this truth table, there's no way that this could be the correct rule of inference for the same connective.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
That would fit with what the previous questioner was saying. Yeah,
Right, okay,
that you want rules of inference that are truth preserving and so on.
right,
Yep.
okay.
So that hasn't gone away. That's still a very important idea. But my point right now is you can't derive the rule of inference from the truth table. There's still a place for these other points, but these points involve you in using rules of inference. You've got to be thinking things through if you're going to make the kind of point you just made. You're going to say, oh, well, if these two were true, then the conclusion would have to be true. That's conditional reasoning. You've got to be able to use modus ponens there. Yep.
So,
And conditional introduction. Yeah.
we obviously do have this ability to, we've already got it right, but we can specify, we can define the rules, because at the end we are just doing it in terms of this idea of a minimal set of truth-preserving rules, right, that tells you as much as you can. So even though you have to use maybe modus ponens to get off the ground in the first place, you can justify, it's still a derivation of the rule, because what you do is you show that it does do these.
Once you have all the rules and once you're up and running with a set of rules, then you can do the thing you said, and then Melissa was saying, yeah, you can derive the rules of inference and show they are truth preserving and so on. But you're using the rules themselves at that point. You haven't justified the rules from the ground, you haven't derived the rules from the ground up from the truth table. You took the rules for granted, and then you said, but this seems completely compelling. Well, sure, but that's because the rules themselves seem completely compelling. Yep.
The inference rules that we presuppose
Ah.
make them up? Like, is that just an innate thing? That's just how we reason?
Here we reach bedrock and the spade is turned. Right. Well, at any rate, what I just said is one possibility. Yeah. I mean, I think the situation here is the great thing about the thinking about the propositional signs like and or and if then and so on is that the theory of them is very simple. You know, it is just the truth tables and the rules of inference. There isn't anywhere else to look, if you see what I mean. So just thinking through what is going on here is a relatively tractable problem. But if you think about the, remember the thing about the image of the old man who might be going up a hill or sliding down? Yeah. Wittgenstein's basic point about images here was you can't derive the way you use the term from the image, because in any, it always turns out you're just interpreting the image in terms of your way of using it. Yeah. And that's the same point here, that you can't interpret this without presupposing a way of using the signs. Yeah. This is just a dead function unless you assume your favorite way of using these signs. Okay. So just as you can't derive the use of the words from the images, you can't derive the use of the propositional signs from the truth tables. If I've explained this correctly, this should seem completely inescapable. Yeah, even though what you and Melissa were saying is also correct. Yeah, it's just that what you're saying involves using the rules to do the derivations you're talking about. Plain as day? Okay, so that means, on the face of it, that all we have are the rules of inference. The rules of inference are the basic way of understanding the sign. The truth table comes next. The truth table is like, just as with the images, you might give yourself a kind of pictorial illustration in your head to illustrate how you're going to use the sign. So with the and if then and or and so on, you've just got your way of using the sign, and you can give yourself the truth table as a kind of image, a kind of pictorial accompaniment to your use of the sign. But that's all it is. Oh, I did get the X's and Y's in there. Okay. Yep.
Just to give it some reference, the reason we're throwing out the truth tables is the same reason why, it's like it's analogous to the Wittgenstein says that every action will be framed to be in accordance with the rules.
Exactly. Right. Right. So if I presupposed a different set of inference rules, yeah, a really wacky out there set of inference rules, I could derive a really wacky out there set of inference rules from the truth tables. Yeah. Which is just like the case of the use of the image of red to interpret the word red. Yeah. You could do anything you like with that image. You could say, choose the color that's right next to this in the spectrum. Choose the color that, well, I don't know. Okay, you can imagine lots of wacky things you could do with the image of red. And similarly, you could do lots of wacky things with the truth tables. The only reason we don't is we have it so firmly in us that we're going to use the terms in something like these ways. These are going to be the basic rules of inference that we'll use. Okay? So far, there is a triumphant vindication of what Wittgenstein was saying. Yes?
I just wanted to clarify though, you could have said it the other way around, right? You could have said actually all there is the truth tables and it's the rules that are the image.
Is all there is the truth table? Yeah.
And then you could say that's the more fundamental thing, and there aren't really any rules, it's just truth tables.
Yeah, but then if you just had the truth table, you wouldn't know how to use the sign. So you wouldn't be capable of reasoning.
But in the same way that because you wanted to say that, so there was, you just really start with the rules, right?
Yes.
And then you can throw the truth table out the window.
That's right.
It's just like an unnecessary thing.
That's right.
But can't I just say, actually, all I started with is the truth tables, and I have these output results, and then I do this thing of justifying it with the rules, and you go, but you don't actually need the rules, because you have these truth tables, and you have these outputs.
I see the appeal of doing that, but it's a little bit like with red or something saying, I could just stick with the image, and have no idea how to use the term. Yeah, because and it seems particularly unattractive with logical signs, because there is nothing to the logical signs if you can't reason with them. Yeah, I mean, what have you got left of an understanding of the logical signs if someone can grasp the truth tables for all the signs, but has no idea how to reason? You just give them all the truth. Suppose you have someone who is incapable of deductive reasoning, and you say, look, here's the truth tables. Get on with it. Well, they can't get on with it, right? They have no capacity for reasoning. So what have they got by way of an understanding of and or if then? Yeah, they just have this inert sign. Well, it doesn't. Well, that's what I'm questioning. Is it really symmetric? Because suppose you do it around the other way. Suppose we have a person who's incapable of deductive reasoning, and they don't have any logical signs at all, no truth tables, nothing, and we just teach them the rules of inference, and they get through the rules of inference just fine. They can reason just like as well as anybody else. Well, what more do you want? That's fine. And they say, oh, well, they've never grasped the truth table. Well, who cares? I mean, their reasoning is perfect. They can spot fallacies in your reasoning. They can.
I think that works.
Yeah.
Well. I just think it should be able to work with the truth table.
I think that's the thing I don't see yet, is why that's symmetric. Someone who's just got the truth table but has no idea how to reason, I don't see why you'd say they understand and or if then.
Well, you could say that they're reasoning directly from that truth table. You can sort of imagine they just see it and they can't tell any rule that they're following or anything like that, but they just get the image of it in their mind.
Yeah, they get the image. So yeah, I mean, suppose that happens. You get the image. Well, great. But I can't use the sign. I can't do anything with it. One, two. Yeah, we should. Yeah, I'm sorry. There's a fair bit to get through, but yeah.
I think that what Professor Campbell's trying to get at is that you only understand the table as providing the rules of inference because you're establishing it. Like saying A is true, B is true, therefore A and B is true. If you didn't have rules of inference, you just wouldn't know what to do with that. Like one solves great.
That's a very good way to put it. Okay, so if you ask, what is the truth table saying? What does this mean? If this is true and B is true, then A and B is true, right? These look like conditionals, yeah? And you'd need to have someone who understands the conditionals all right, but can't reason using them. Can't, from if this is true and that is false and the whole thing is false, conclude from this is true and this is false to the whole thing is false. You see what I mean? They don't have the simplest dynamics of reasoning here. And in what sense would they even understand the truth table if they couldn't make those operations with it? Yeah, that's better put than I put it myself. Yep. Yep.
I was just following up on what he said. It's sort of that the rules of inference are simply syntactical, and reasoning and inference require the use of semantic well in order to explain the use of the syntax. You have to be using like ordinary language or something that has a semantics that you can express that.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying I don't see. I don't see the idea of a semantic grounding for the rules yet. Because a semantic, putting it in terms of semantics and syntax, getting a semantic derivation of the rules would require the use of syntactical rules. But it was exactly the syntactical rules you were trying to derive. So there's no derivation of the syntax from semantics here.
But if you abstracted like Wittgenstein when he created the truth table, if you abstracted the rules of inference in an algebraic form from ordinary
Yeah, that's what that is. Yeah.
then that's the direction you've got a semantics, and you're reducing it to an algebraic.
Semantics here, for present purposes, semantics is a truth table. That's a semantic account of A and B. Yeah. And this is the syntax. Yeah. And you can't get Semantics means it has to do with truth, right? So this is the bit that has to do with truth. And I'm saying you can't derive the syntax from the semantics. Because you have to use syntactic transformations to get there, to do it. Okay, has all resistance been crushed? Are you feeling full of a hopeless dullness of spirit? Well, somebody's got to do it. Okay, very good. Right. We marched triumphantly on, yes. Melissa? No? Okay. We'll come back to this on Wednesday anyway. But I actually agree that there should be some resistance here. I mean, the basic logical point here seems to be simple. I mean, this is what I keep saying about Wittgenstein's negative point, that it's just incontrovertible, I think. And the negative point here seems to me just incontrovertible. You can't get the syntactic transformations, the rules of inference from the truth table. Nonetheless, there's something extremely unintuitive about this, about the way that truth drops out here. And I think if I try to articulate what's missing, so here I'm trying to do justice to some of the resistance, right? That we think of the bit in the middle as defining your objective in using the sign. I mean, when you're using a sign meaningfully, when you understand what you're doing, there's the point of what you're up to in using the sign. You've got your perceptual input or rules of inference or whatever it is, input to applying the term, to saying this is round or this is square or whatever it is. There's your output from the application, but the bit in the middle is trying to say what your objective is in using the sign. I think in general, knowledge of what has to be so for a sentence to be true is knowledge of your objective in using your ways of verifying the sentence, and when you draw implications from the sentence, it's what you were doing. So that's how skeptical questioning is possible. Because when Descartes is raising skeptical questions, what he's doing is he's saying, I know what it takes for my sentence to be true. I know what it takes for all these sentences to be true. But are my usual ways of finding out about the truth of the sentence any good? And that would be analogous to saying, I know what it takes for A and B to be true, but are my usual introduction rules for and any good? They have to match with what I'm about, what I'm trying to verify when I use these methods of verification. You see what I mean? I mean, I think ordinarily we don't take ourselves to be operating blindly. We think we know what kind of thing we mean by our sentences, and so it really always seems like a good question. Are my methods of verification any good? That's what the skeptic is doing. So skepticism says, are the ways we use to verify statements really good ways of finding whether they're true? I mean, it's a bit like if you do something for another reason, like suppose you just love to make music, right? You say, well, I do this because this is the way I'm going to make money, right? Then 10 years down the line, it is possible for someone to say to you, is this really a good way of making money? Let's draw up a balance sheet. Let's look at the alternatives, right? That would make sense. On the other hand, if you say, I just love making music, that's it, right? Who cares? I just wake up and I'm instantly thinking about it. I don't want to do anything else. Then that kind of criticism isn't possible. You see what I mean? If you're doing the thing because there's some external point to it, then you can ask, is it matching that point? On the other hand, is it if you're doing the thing for its own sake, then you're not subject to that kind of criticism. Yeah? So, Wittgenstein says, this is just how I like to use words. This is just the way of my people. Here I reach bedrock and the spade is turned. This is the way I talk. So Descartes' kind of critique is just not possible. Descartes says, when you use perception the way you do, to verify your statements. There's some further thing you're using it for, namely to find out whether the statements are true. Yeah? Wittgenstein says, there is no such further thing. That's the myth of the thing in the middle. I just talk the way I do. Yeah? That's all it comes to, that my statements are correct or not. So if you take, this is a cube, that's a cube, that over there is a cube, if you think of the way you use the terms there, and the image of a cube is functioning to tell you what you're doing here, what you're trying to get at, the essential cubicity of the thing. And then you're told, no, there's no such thing. That means your ways of determining whether it's a cube and the implications you draw from it being a cube, they can't be criticized. What the skeptic's always trying to do is say, but these things don't get you what you think they get you. And Wittgenstein's approach means, really, there's no possibility of skepticism. And for example, there's no way of criticizing our technique for using and. If someone says, I don't think these are the right rules of inference for and, then Wittgenstein's going to say, well, here we reach bedrock and the spade is turned. If you guys who think there is some work for the truth table to do, well, it would actually be in principle possible to discover there was some subtle flaw in the reasoning that made these patterns of inference seem correct. Yeah? It would be possible for a skeptic to point that out. Or maybe there's some findings in empirical science that suggest that this can't be the right way to go. But if we've only got the rules of inference, then they can't be justified or criticized. And in general, it's actually very hard to believe that's right. Suppose you take something like the notion of a witch, right? I mean, people don't really use the notion of a witch nowadays, except in a kind of jokey way or something, the way it used to be used, somewhat anyway. But suppose you have these rules of inference for using a witch. Suppose you're in a community where these are the rules of inference for using witch. X floats when pushed into water. From that, you can derive X is a witch. And then from X is a witch, you can derive X should be burned. Then you have a very simple procedure. And you say, but you know, read Wittgenstein. This is the way of my people. This is what we do. Here we reach bedrock and the spade is turned. When reasons give out, I shall just go on. But is that okay? Surely anybody would say, no, wait a minute. What do you mean which? Right? This isn't really coherent. Yeah? There must be some possibility. Skepticism is just one example of how you can criticize the ways we use terms. Yeah?
Sorry, just to make sure that I understand the analogy between this and
Sure.
the logical connected rule. So the thing at the top is kind of like a which introduction rule.
That's right, yeah.
It allows you to go from some premise that doesn't involve the word which
That's right.
to a conclusion that does. And then the one on the bottom is a which elimination rule.
That's right, exactly.
Okay, so it's kind of like how you could have an and introduction rule, A, B, therefore
That's right,
B.
that's right. Look,
And the
yeah,
elimination rule is A and B, therefore A.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, in a correct Wittgensteinian approach, someone doesn't understand A. You say, look, here's the introduction rule, here's the elimination rule. That's all you need to know, right? Someone doesn't understand which. You say, okay, you don't understand which. Here's the introduction rule, here's the elimination rule. What more do you want to know?
Then it does seem like with this one, because you have the same number of parentheses in the introduction and the conclusion rule, you can just get rid of the word which altogether and just say X should be burned follows from X floats when pushed into water.
Ah, that's a very good point. Okay. Actually, just in the last couple of seconds, I want to generalize that point. This can't be the right way of thinking of it, right? This can't. And Pryor's tonk example in the reading is it is just beautifully pin sharp. You know, these examples kind of raise the temperature, if you see what I mean, and they get complex when you discuss them. Tonk is an absolutely laboratory example of this. So suppose you've got Pryor's question is, suppose you take this idea that the rules of inference are the basic thing and the truth table is just, well, who cares about truth tables, right? That's just an accompaniment for our use of language. Well, suppose we have a sign, tonk, that works like this. Remember the introduction rule for or? Yeah. Suppose we have this introduction rule for tonk. From A, you can infer A tonk B, and from B, you can infer A tonk B. Yep, that's all right. Okay? Follow me like a leopard. Follow me very closely here. Okay. So from Raleigh smokes, you can infer Raleigh smokes, tonk, Elvis is alive. That's all right. It's just like or. Yeah? And now, what's the elimination rule for tonk? The elimination rule for tonk is like the elimination rule for and. From A and B, you can infer A. From A and B, you can infer B. Right? So the elimination rule for tonk is from A tonk B, you can infer A, and from A tonk B, you can infer B. Right? That's all right too. Perfectly well defined. Okay? So this is the way of my people. From A and A tonk B, A we get A tonk B, from B we get B, A tonk B, and from A and B we get A, and from A tonk B we get A, and from A tonk B we get B. Right? That's just the way we reason. Yeah? Why not? Going to stop me? Yes?
Wouldn't be able to reason from A to B, just stop with A.
There is, yeah. So just summing up, we get A, from A we get A tonk B, from B we get A tonk B, from A tonk B we get A, and from A tonk B we get B. So your point is we can reason from A to B. Yeah, from A I can get A tonk B, and from A tonk B I can get B. So look at the power of that, right? I mean, if mathematicians use this, they would greatly simplify mathematical proof, right? I mean, you take whatever premises you have, right? 25 squared is 625. You take Fermat's last theorem. So from 25 squared to 625, I get 25 squared to 625 tonk, Fermat's last theorem. From 25 squared is 625 tonk, Fermat's last theorem. I get Fermat's last theorem. Hey, I just did it, right? You can bypass all this tedious mathematics. Look, isn't that fantastic? I mean, from Raleigh smokes, you can get Raleigh smokes, tonk, Elvis is alive. From Raleigh smokes, tonk, Elvis is alive, you can get Elvis is alive. Yeah? Look at that. Don't say you don't learn anything in this class. Right? I mean, these people who think Obama can't really be president, well, there's a sparrow in the grass. There's a sparrow in the grass, tonk, Romney is president. There's a sparrow in the grass, tonk, Romney is president. Hence, Romney is president. Well, there you go. Isn't that great? Right. Why stop short at the thing with witches? Yeah. Okay. So there must be something, at any rate, incomplete about all these devastating points from Wittgenstein. And on that note, we'll stop for today. Okay, thanks, guys.